Hello. The Divine Code reading for September 22nd, pages 213 and 214. We are in the chapter Aspects of Idolatry from which benefit is allowed and Nullification of Idols. Topic number 2. If someone sacrificed someone else's animal to an idol, or performed some other act of idolatry with it that has physically altered it. For example, if one begins to make a slaughtering cut in his friend's animal for the sake of an idol, that animal becomes forbidden. Ra'avad Shakanor Yeridea 145:8. So if something a person does not own, their friend's animal, or just something in a park or a public area, something the person does not own, normally they would not be able to change the status of the item because they don't own it. Therefore, they can't declare it as a item for idol worship, and therefore their action of idol worship would not cause the object to change status. It doesn't belong to the person. But if they change it, if they physically alter the item as part of the act of idol worship, it's no longer considered the previous item. The animal that has its throat partially cut for beginning of use of idol worship, that physically changes the animal to the extent that it's no longer considered to be the previous animal. It's no longer the same object, and therefore it's a new object, and the person has changed it for the sake of the idol worship. Then it would be forbidden for benefit, because the action involved caused it to be acquired, so to speak, by the person doing it. Now that might be a concern about the laws of theft also, maybe, but that it's that kind of, the person acquires and therefore has the ability to have the status changed to one that has been used for idolatry. Topic number 3. If someone bows down to the ground as an act of worshiping it, this does not make that place forbidden. A hole, pit, or cave that was dug as an act of idol worship may not be used, even if one did not yet bow down to it. In Beit Yosef Yeridea, chapter 145. Even though Tor and Shach 145:20 write that it is only forbidden by bowing down to it, it is possible that in regard to Gentiles, they forbid it as soon as it is formed. This is still unclear. So the question is, if a natural object, such as an area of ground. Now, when an object is dedicated, the person has the ability to change the object. He has acquired the object. As soon as it's dedicated for idol worship, for a non-Jew, it's considered to be forbidden for benefit. For a Jew, it's not considered forbidden until it's actually been worshipped. An item that's been dedicated is not considered forbidden until it's actually been worshipped. But for a non-Jew, for a Gentile, the object is considered forbidden for benefit as soon as it's dedicated. The dedication is what makes it considered an idolatrous item, whereas for a Jew, it would be the use in idolatry that makes it forbidden for benefit. If one wishes to nullify it, he must add back what was taken out. This is similar to the case of the house of stone, which was explained in topics 11 and 12 below. So if he dug out a pit to be used for idolatry, and in this case it's referring to the pit itself being worshipped for idolatry, so it becomes the idolatrous object. The pit is what becomes forbidden, not the earth itself, but the pit is what is forbidden. If the earth is filled back in, then it nullifies the pit. The pit is no longer considered a pit, and therefore the resulting ground, if it's going back to its natural state, or it's altering the state to the extent that it's no longer the pit, therefore what's left would be considered useful for benefit. It can be used. Topic number 4. A wave on a natural body of water that was bowed down to is not forbidden for benefit. But if one took water with his hand or with a vessel that had been bowed down to it, it is forbidden for benefit. Boulders that have been moved by natural causes, such as a landslide, and that were worshipped in the place where they came to rest, are permitted for benefit, because these are natural objects which have moved naturally, not by the influence of a person. That's in the Rambam Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, 8.2, Shokanor Yeridea, chapter 145, and Shak Yeridea, 145.1. So a naturally occurring cloud. The cloud is floating by and somebody decides to worship it. The cloud would be acceptable for benefit by other people because the guy didn't do anything to the cloud. It rains later on or it provides shade. People can benefit from this. The fact that people are worshiping that specific cloud doesn't mean anything. Similarly, what's saying here, a wave on an ocean or a boulder, when they're in their natural state, people might worship this, but it doesn't change the object in any way, and therefore it wouldn't affect other people can still benefit from it. However, if the person took the boulder, and he said, wow, this is a fantastic boulder, it slid down, and it was, they decided it's got spiritual power or something, so they take it to another location, they take it to their front yard or to the city park or something. And then if people worship the boulder where it laid, but naturally that would not affect the boulder. But if they move it to another location and they worship it there, then that would affect the boulder because it's no longer considered to change the status of they changed the acquired. They did an active acquisition over the boulder, which now gives them the ability to change its status to an idolatrous image, which would not be permitted for benefit. But as long as it sits where it is, it sits at the the side of the road where it laid, they can worship it, and other people will still be able to benefit from it because they didn't change anything to the boulder. Topic number 5. Something natural that is not altered by a person who worships it, such as a mountain, an animal, or a tree. It is permitted for benefit. But its coverings and utensils are forbidden for benefit, as will be explained in chapter 9. For example, coverings are a cloth covering an item connected to the worshiping hill, to a worshipped hill, or a silver tray placed on a mountain to ordain it as an idol. For example, if a utensil is a fire pan for burning incense as a service of worshiping a beast, So these natural objects, they got the boulder on the side of where it landed on the side of the road, and it's still in its natural place. So therefore, the person would not change the boulder status into an idolatrous object because it's a natural object. You can't change it when it's in its natural state. But if people did worship it, even though the boulder itself doesn't change, if they're using things, if they put colored decorations on it, they put banners on it or something, and that's part of the worship, the banners would be forbidden, even though it's in its natural state. And that would also be in the case of any of these other natural state items. The items themselves would not change, but the accoutrements, the things that are used in the worship, those would change, and that's described in a further chapter further on in this book. Topic number 6. If a Jew set up one of his bricks, that's a generic term used for any of his belongings. So a brick could be, a lawnmower. They use the lawnmower, the garden gnome, the couch, anything that he owns is given the term in the halakha. It's referred to in this sense as a brick. Somebody set up a brick for idol worship could mean any of his objects. In order to bow down to it, but did not do so, then if a Gentile came along and bowed down to it, it becomes forbidden for benefit because it is being set up to be worshipped. Was an act of dedication. Rambam, Laws of the Stars of Worship and Idols 8.2. Rema Yerodea, chapter 139. So there's two different aspects. Usually for a non-Jew, the dedication itself turns it into an object. An object that's been dedicated for idol worship would automatically be forbidden for benefit. It would automatically have that status of an idolatrous object. For a Jew, is a two-step process. One is it's been dedicated. The dedication does not make it forbidden for benefit. It's not yet a idolatrous object. It might be still in the status like a natural object. It hasn't changed its status yet. But until it's been worshipped, and that worship can occur with somebody else. The person who dedicates it doesn't actually have to worship it himself. If somebody else comes along and worships it, so somebody sets up their lawnmower and says that they're going to turn this lawnmower into an idolatrous thing. It's a really awesome lawnmower, and it does a nice job cutting the grass. And they want to worship it. They want to dedicate it for idol worship as an idol. Someone else walks along, because it's already been dedicated. Somebody else now is able, even if they don't acquire it, they don't do anything. It doesn't belong to them. Because it's already been given that dedicated status, if the other person worships it, it becomes an idolatrous object that is forbidden for benefit. So nobody can use the lawnmower there because it would be an idolatrous object. A person, if the Jew dedicated the lawnmower, another person could come along, the Jew himself or somebody else could still use the lawnmower. But once it's been worshipped, it would be forbidden for benefit. And that's a difference between the Jew and the Gentile. The Jew and the non-Jew. The Jew, it's a two-step process. The non-Jew, the dedication itself is sufficient to make it forbidden for benefit. However, if a Gentile set up a different brick that belonged to this Jew and bowed down to it, it does not become forbidden, because one cannot make forbidden for benefit an object that is not his, even if he sets it up or raises the object and worships it, as long as he doesn't make an alteration in the object itself. So if the Jew dedicates his lawnmower to idol worship, and the non-Jew or anybody else, for that matter, if somebody else comes along and decides they're going to worship the rake, the guys have the lawnmower, it's an idol worship. He says, yeah, but you know, I really like rakes, so the person wants to worship the rake. He takes the rake, he worships it. He doesn't own the rake, and therefore the worshiping of the rake doesn't affect it, turn it into anything. It's still just a regular rake. The person would be liable in court for worshiping something, but the rake itself would not change its status. It's still like the boulder on the side of the mountain that hasn't, the side of the road that is natural and it hasn't moved, and therefore the person worships it, doesn't change it. The person worshiping the rake, that he doesn't belong to him and it was never dedicated to idol worship, doesn't affect the status of the rake itself, or whatever it is the person's worshiping. If the person did something substantial to the rake, he changed the handle, and now it's got a different. He decided because he's going to worship the handle and wants to worship the rake, he wants it to have an ivory handle instead of a wooden handle. He's going to put an ivory handle on it. He's changed the status of the rake sufficiently that he now is able to do. But if it just grabs the other person's object without changing it substantially, his worship of the other person's object doesn't affect the idol, or doesn't affect it into a status of an idol. It would just still be a common rake that could be, people can use the rake. How is this explained? In the first case, the Jew dedicated his own object as an idol. The Jew's idol only becomes forbidden when it is worshipped by him or someone else, even though it does not belong to the other person, since it was already designated as an idol, as explained above in topic 7.4. That was earlier today. This is because the actual worship of the idol is needed to make it forbidden, if it belongs to a Jew. But in the second case, it is possible that the Jew only desired to dedicate the first brick, the first object, as an idol, but not any of his other objects, bricks. As Shaki Oradea 139.1. It goes without saying that one who bows down to an object that is not his, like one who is walking in a public path bows down to a statue that was made for decoration, is liable for bowing down to it. But the object does not become forbidden for benefit, because one cannot make forbidden for benefit something that isn't one's own, if he doesn't alter it. So the person's walking through the park, he sees a statue, he really likes the statue, he bows down to the statue. The statue doesn't change its status. Now, if the person did something substantial to the statue, that is no longer the earlier statue. He does some weird sculpturing thing. He changes the statue sufficiently that's no longer the former object, but now it's something different. Then he's acquired it to the sense that he is bowing down to it, or his worshiping of it, or it would change the status of the statue to something forbidden for benefit. But if one alters the object as an act of idol worship, for example, slaughtering an animal that was mentioned earlier, or chiseling a stone or brick, it becomes forbidden, even if it does not belong to the worshiper. And this is because the person, and specifically the act of idol worship, he's doing this change as an act of idol worship. Now, whether or not that would constitute theft, we'll learn that in a future chapter specifically, because it's very specific as to what would be considered theft. If he changes something, does that mean the object was stolen by him, as well as, so therefore he acquires it himself, or does the change occur without him acquiring it, but because it was done as an act of idol worship? Like he sees the statue and he says it's so close to what he sees for idolatry. He has this image in his head that he's looking for idolatry, and the statue is like 90% there, and he gets out his chisel and he changes it enough that it matches what he's looking for. That action of doing it in connection to the idol worship, or the person that takes the rake and he says, if this thing had an ivory handle, it would be the perfect idol. So he takes off the wooden handle, he adds an ivory handle. Now, because he did it in connection to the idol worship, that changes the status. Thank you.